Well, hello everyone with Renovating Riches Radio. This is Dennis Rodriguez. I'm here with my co-host,
Ricardo Rosales, and today we have the honor of having Meg Banahan from Banahan and Martinez, who are actually our preferred attorneys and title company now. They're our go-to guys when it comes to contracts.
And everything title. So they own... Is it a franchise, a good way of saying it, or just an office from American?
So we're fee attorneys for American Title. That means we have a contract with American Title to close their transactions. So they still do all the examination and underwriting, and then we do the closing services. So most everything that a customer would see would be involving us.
Well, thank you for being here with us, Meg. We're going to start shooting questions at you, but... For our audience, if you've been looking for what's normally called an investor-friendly title company, especially in the Houston area, make sure to reach out to them. We're going to have their information right down in the description of this video. Or if you're just listening to the podcast, look at the show notes, and we're going to have their information.
On our website as well, we're going to have a link to their website. That way you can go check them out.
So, Meg... there's a question I want to address, and we've talked about title in other episodes. You can go back and listen to those. But you were at one of our events probably a few weeks or a month ago, and you were talking about what a title company does and what a title company does not. And at that event, I learned something, and you know, we are learning all the time, and this is the reason we bring this to our audience, so you know we can try to get them to understand better what we do and talk about enterprises and business in general. But on one of your slides, you were talking about what a title company does not do. And it stick like a sore thumb that title companies do not fix clouds or stuff that's wrong in title.
Right. So it's not necessarily the title company's job to clear the title for you. Obviously, the escrow officers will kind of help guide you through that process, or at least identify those issues. But you're getting title insurance. It's just like any other insurance policy. So when you get that commitment, it's telling you, we'll issue insurance, and these are the terms and conditions. And so you'll see all the exceptions, and then Schedule C, is what most people pay attention to, and that shows you all the issues that need to be cleared. If they're not cleared, they're going to be exceptions. And so it's not their job to fix all those Schedule C problems.
Let me ask you a question before you get to yours. You talked about the schedules. Mm-hmm. How many schedules are there, and what's on each schedule?
So Schedule A is kind of the first page that you see, and it shows what type of policy is going to be issued, the amount of the policy, who title is currently vested in, and then it has the property description, the legal description. So it's sort of your basic information. Schedule B will go through and tell you the exceptions to the policy, so things that the insurance will not cover. There's usually the standard exceptions that you'll see, and then you get down to, usually it's like number 10 on most policies, and it'll be more specific things. So that'll be your easements, if there's restrictions on the, an HOA with restrictions on the property. A lot of like oil and gas leases maybe will show up on the property. So those kind of things. So exceptions for, they're not going to cover, any kind of damages related to those things. Schedule C is where you'll find like there's a mortgage, a current loan on the property that needs to be paid off or released. If there's, say, a title issue. So sometimes on Schedule A, it'll say, this person's in title subject to these restrictions. Maybe they're deceased and they haven't probated their estate. Well, then Schedule C will say, this is what you need to do to fix those problems on Schedule A.
And I guess just as a disclaimer, we're talking mainly Texas law and Texas processes here. If you're in another state, make sure you contact a local either attorney or title company and find out how it works in your specific area.
Yeah. So only three schedules, A, B, and C.
Well, D also shows like who has an interest in the title in the company, who's going to get part of the premium. So it'll show you, the underwriter gets X% of the premium, and then the, title company gets this much, and, we'll get a certain percentage for closing the transaction. And then if it's sometimes we have to use another title company to do the examination if it's a county that we don't have, coverage at our plant. And then they would get a percentage. So that kind of shows you the splits and who all the people, the shareholders, things like that are. Most people don't really look at that schedule. They're focused on
C.
A, B, and C, mostly C.
Yeah, I go straight to see.
Yeah,
It's like,
I go
are there
straight to
problems?
That's why I ask her that question, because I every time I get a title commitment, I don't even look at anything else.
Yeah.
And then I remember on one of the properties we had with you, you said, yeah, we can probably move that from Schedule C to Schedule B. And I was like, okay, but,
What does that mean?
what does that mean, right?
Yeah. So you should be looking at all three. Obviously, C is probably for investors. I mean, that's where you're going to find all your problems that you need to fix. To see
But
how
now that
long
you
it's gonna
explained it,
take.
I understand that anything on Schedule B is actually exceptions.
Right.
So it's not covered under the title insurance. So when I get the we can move that from C to B. Oh, okay, wait a minute. That's not
yeah.
going to be covered on the insurance.
Right. And sometimes there'll be things on Schedule B that you do want to look at, and it'll just have a vague description of like some agreement filed under such and such number, and it'll tell you where to go find the document. And it may not be just a normal easement or something. I've seen, memorandums of contract on Schedule B. And it's not necessarily the title company's job to say, hey, did you see this? Did you go pull that document and look at it? If it's on Schedule B.
Okay.
Now, once I saw that in your slide, my next question is, or was at that time, okay, so if the title company is not technically responsible to fix or cure any clouds in title, then who's supposed to be doing it? And I know for the most part, like you mentioned, escrow officers tend to help with that because, that's what I think. And the way I see it, that's what makes a title company investor friendly. Like it's normally thrown out there. But in reality, it isn't the title company's job to do.
Right.
You're just kind of like doing it to
Facilitating.
help your
Yeah.
clients. But in a perfect world, if I'm the buyer or the seller of a property and there's issues with title, who should I hire or where should I go to start cleaning or fixing those problems?
Usually a real estate attorney. So the way we got started before we opened the title company, we were actually doing that for our clients. So we would help them. They would send us the title commitment. We would review it. We would help them fix all those things on Schedule C. We would actually reach out to the title company and say, hey, have you asked your underwriter, about doing this to clear the issue? Because you'll notice there's requirements on there that come from the examiners. They'll say, there's this issue. We need to get this document, or we need to have this done. And sometimes, you can talk to the underwriting attorney and maybe propose a different solution that's a little easier than going back and finding all the people from 1970 that signed this document and have them re-sign it, because you might be able to convince them maybe like, the risk isn't as great. It's like, okay, do we really need to do this? Could we just do this instead? And so a real estate attorney can kind of help you walk through that process and actually prepare those documents that you need. So,
And you're talking, I guess, about the affidavits of heirship, for example,
Right.
power of attorneys that might be needed to cure some of those issues. Now, we've also heard from other investors that they hire what's called like a transaction coordinator to do that job. Is that person empowered? If it's not an attorney, are they empowered to go after those clouds, those things in Schedule C, and calling banks? And I mean, how far can they go if they're not attorneys?
Well, I mean, it kind of depends on what they're doing. I mean, if you're trying to get a payoff from someone that's being a pain about giving it to you, obviously they can call, and they can call every day, and that's probably more economical for them to do it than to hire an attorney to bill you by the hour to make those calls. It just depends on how much they know about clearing title as to far as like what the issue is. they can definitely communicate with the title company. So your escrow officer is kind of the go-between between the like underwriting attorney and then the customers. And so, they're going to relay to you what their underwriting attorney says as far as, this is what needs to get done. If you have questions or want to pose different solutions, then they should present those, to that underwriting attorney.
So you definitely need to have someone that's creative in solutions that might help, like you said, not necessarily go with what the underwriter is suggesting doing. I mean, someone that...
Yeah, I mean, because there's other solutions. I mean, there could be other ways to cure it, or you may have to, that may be the only way. You just never know. Yeah. But, like with us, Veronica and I both have a background in clearing title from a legal standpoint. And so when we look at Schedule C and we're talking, like, say, with you on one of your files, and I'm like, okay, these are the issues, we need to correct this deed from, 20 years ago. Do you know if these people are still living? Do you know what happened? And then we can kind of talk about it, and then I can go back to the underwriter and say, okay, I got some more information. This is really what's going on. Could we do this to kind of cure it? And so with our background as attorneys, that kind of helps us in communicating with those underwriters as escrow officers. So we kind of play two different roles. But the background definitely helps because you know what questions to ask.
And that helps explain why you have been so successful doing our cases and why we bring our files to you, and you should be doing too if you're in the Houston area. Ricardo, do you have any other questions for Meg?
So, not really. I mean, I just want to know what is it's a process of getting a contract open until you close it. How does that look like from your standpoint?
So as soon as we get the contract, a fully signed contract, I mean, we're going to open title right away, typically that same day that we get it from you guys. And so what that means, I mean, we just go into our system, open it up, put in the request that they do the examination. Usually it takes around 3 to 5 business days. Obviously if it's a unique situation, like sometimes we hear from people at the end of the month, like, hey, there's a foreclosure next week, can we get it faster? And sometimes we can. It really just depends on like what's in the title. So if they start doing the examination and there's not really any issues, there's a mortgage and, a couple other little things, but there's no, major title issues. There's no, dead people file. It's not a dead people file. Then we can get that back to you in like 3 days. And we're talking about the commitment, as well as the tax certificate. And so those are kind of the first steps. So it's like you give us a contract, we open title, usually takes about 3 to 5 days. Then you'll get your title commitment, your tax certificate. And at that point, then we'll be able to tell like, okay, this is a pretty clean file. Okay. There's let's look at Schedule C. We usually review it when we send you the title commitment and say, hey, on Schedule C, numbers, 8, 9, and 10, these are the issues and this is what needs to happen. It could be as simple as getting an affidavit prepared and filed, and that might only take a couple of days. As you guys know, there's some where it's like, oh, we found out that there's like 5 or 6 people that inherited the property.
They all live in different states.
And they're all over the country, and now we have to reach out to, and so that can take a little longer. I've had some that are worse where it's like, okay, there's, this property was still in like great grandma's name, and it has been inherited through like 3 generations, and they've done nothing with it. Meaning that they didn't file any affidavits of heirships, they didn't do any probates, there were no wills. And so then we had to go back and do 7 or 8 affidavits of heirship because there's that many people that have died since, the original vesting deed, and trying to find all of those family members. So some of those could take months to clear. But usually once you get that title commitment, we know. So we get the title commitment, say it's pretty clean, we don't really have any, major issues. And then it just depends on, do you have a lender that's going to, be loaning you the money to purchase the property? When are they going to be ready? When is everybody going to be available? Let's schedule the closing.
Okay.
I just want to say something on that note, and this is a tip for people listening to us. This is I don't want to say a trick because in reality it's not a trick. It's just out of experience. We have gone through so many houses we've negotiated, contracts we've done, that Ricardo and I have learned this, and we're gonna pass this along to you. When you're negotiating a house and you already have a price agreed on, and you're filling out that contract, when it comes to part to filling out the closing date, we now ask the seller several questions that give us an idea of how long this is going to take for closing. And again, things like, do you solely own the property, or do you have any siblings? If it's a house that was inherited, we always ask questions like that. If it's an inheritance, we ask them, did this went through the right probate process, or where you at in that? And if they tell us, no, nothing has done, my mom died, I don't know, 3 years ago, and I have 8 siblings, that right there bumps up the closing at least 60 to 90 days more than what you have in mind. So if you think, okay, I can close in this property, let's say in 2 weeks, 14 days. Now, if they answer, yes, we inherited this property, and yes, I have 8 siblings, and yes, some of them live in Alaska, you have to tell that seller, okay, instead of 2 weeks, I'm going to put here in closing date like 3 months, because you already know this is going to be a tough one. It's going to be one that it's going to require time.
A lot of work.
So you prepare the seller ahead of time, even before signing that contract or during the process of signing it, that this is going to be a long process. And we've learned this through, this process that we're talking about. Some houses, we want to close in 2 weeks and end up being 6 months. You never know. There's houses that have not gone through the probate process, and the seller wants to go through the right probate process, and it takes a year, especially Harris County. So that's a tip of the day. When you're filling out that contract, putting the closing date, ask some questions first, so or have an idea. Things show up without anyone knowing. We have an example right now in the workings that we thought it was going to be a clean, easy closing, and find out that the property was not passed along with the right legal descriptions, and it throws everything back. But you just need to be aware of it.
Yeah. And I would say, those are good questions to ask. And if you find out that information, when you send your contract in to open title, let us know. So if you know, the person that signed the contract actually inherited the property from mom, and mom is deceased, if you let us know, then we can let our examiners know. And so that way there won't be any holdup. Because sometimes they'll see, the contract is in the name of a child, and that doesn't match the records. And so they might put a hold on it. Then they'll come back to us and ask us, oh, I see that the contract is in, Susie's name, but she's not entitled. What's the issue? And so if we can tell them when we submit the order that, hey, mom and dad passed away, and then they'll know to go ahead and put those requirements on the title commitment and not have any kind of hold up, because it won't have to go back and forth.
Something we've been doing, or I've been doing, it's that when I negotiate a property, I look at the legal description, and it's going to tell me who the owner is. So right off the bat, estate of so-and-so, I know that, okay, this is a probate deal. Are you really the executor? So I start asking all these questions. And they all say, oh, yeah, I'm in power. But, right, and turns out they don't have the rights, many times, even though they think they do. So what I do is I put the name that appears on the tax record, and then I put so-and-so signed the contract, on behalf of. And then now the title company knows. As soon as they get it, they say, okay, we need to contact these people, and they let know whoever they need to let know that we need to start chasing all these rabbits around, right? Yeah, that's the way I see it.
And sometimes the sellers just don't understand. I
Right.
mean, probate's not a simple, it's easy to understand in Texas, and they might say, well, my mom and dad owned it, my dad died, and yeah, my mom owned it after that. Well, you still have to put something in the records to show that. The appraisal district may change it without, actually having a deed. If you go tell them hey, so-and-so is paying the taxes now, put it in my name. Sometimes they'll do that without actually getting a deed. They shouldn't really, but I've seen it happen. And so people say, no, but the appraisal district has my name on it, so everything's good. And I'm like, well, that's not the real property records, and that's what we look at when we examine. to show who actually is entitled to the property. So some of it is just they don't really understand the process. And so they might think they have all the power, or maybe they had a power of attorney for their mom, but once their mom passes away, the power of attorney is no longer good. So that doesn't really give them any authority, even though they might think it still does. So
The one that's always surprises them, it's like when one of the original owners passed away, and he had childs or children. Sorry, children is the right word. They had children or a child from a previous marriage, and they don't even know that child has interest in that property, and it's someone that sometimes they have never even met. They know they have like a stepbrother or whatever you want to call it, that the dad or mom had from a previous marriage. They have never met that person, and at closing, that person needs to be contacted, needs to agree on the sale of property, and is probably going to get money out of it.
Yeah.
and that's always like one of those moments where they're like, really, do I have to give money to this person? Yeah, you have to. So Texas law, it's different than many other states, with the, what is it called, common law?
Community properties. It's a community property state, and it does get more complicated when you have sort of a blended family with children from multiple marriages, and there's no will. I mean, if you have a will, then it's whatever the will says.
Straightforward.
But if you don't have a will, and that's
Everybody
another thing
gets a piece of
that's
pie.
hard to understand, that there's statutes that tell you what happens to
I
the
highly
property.
advise everybody, even if you're broke, to have a will. Wills are not just for rich people. Wills are for people to basically say how they want their estate to be executed and who's getting what, So if you're watching this and you don't have a will, you need to go and get with somebody to get a will. Like Megan, but I don't know if you guys prepare them.
We do. We do small estate planning.
Okay.
So, for most everybody kind of falls into that these days. But, it's pretty simple. And like you said, even if you don't have a whole lot, you never know what you might have later on in the future. And you might as well go ahead and make sure it's going to go to who you want it to go to.
You got to protect it before you have it. Okay, so
and it can save your beneficiaries a lot of time and money if you go ahead and have a will, and there's some simple ways to probate it.
It's just what we're talking about. You can avoid a whole year of struggle trying to close on the property just with one piece of paper that's recorded and says exactly what needs to be done.
With that being said, ladies and gents, thank you so much, Meg, for
Thanks for having me.
explaining title commitment to us. It was very, you see, I learned now the right structure.
A, B, C, and D.
What it means.
What it means. I knew what a Schedule C meant, but everything else I really didn't care. Now I do. So thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to talk about title, which is something that a lot of people wonder about it, but nobody asks about it because they just assume that the title company will take care of it.
Yeah, and on the real estate law side, if you need help drafting contracts, anything that's legal documents, feel free to reach out to Meg and Veronica. Again, Meg, do you want to give out an email that people can use to contact you?
Yeah, you can contact us you can contact me at meg@bmlawhouston.com. And Veronica is veronica@bmlawhouston.com. And we work with a lot of new investors, so we do 30-minute consultations for free. So if you want to come and talk about how we could help you out before you get started so you're ready to execute on that first deal once it presents itself, make sure you have the right contracts in place, make sure you're doing it correctly. We can sit down and talk to you about how we can help you get ready for that. So
I think that's worth gold right there.
Now, if you're coming here, make sure you write down your questions. That way,
it's 30 minutes, not 3 hours.
Not 3 hours, okay?
They are very, very busy, and they're growing, they're expanding, they're soon moving to a new, bigger office. So things are going to get better and better for them, and we're so thankful to have them on our team. So with that being said again, thanks for listening. RenovatingRichesRadio.com. In Spanish, renovandoriquezas.com.
Don't forget to hit share, like, and subscribe. Tell your mama, your grandma, and everybody about us, okay? Send it to them. You guys have a great day. Bye.
Thanks.